Thank you all very much for being here. And actually, although I work for what is possibly the oldest engineering higher education institution in the world, we're not going to talk about engineering. We're going to talk about business. Okay. In particular, we're going to talk about why co-creation is so important when it comes to additive manufacturing. So it's so important because when we talk about additive manufacturing or 3D printing, in fact, we are talking about very different usages. First, we did prototypes, and we did tools, and then what? Well, then we do direct manufacturing. But as you can see from this graph, direct manufacturing is still something which is not mainstream. And you've heard from other speakers that actually these are mostly niches. Okay, so niches, bigger niches, more niches, but niches nonetheless. So the question here is, how do we get from niches to mainstream? To understand this question, to be able to answer it, we need to understand what are the advantages of additive manufacturing for fabrication. And of course, one of the key aspects is that the cost per unit when you use additive manufacturing is constant, whereas if you use injection molding, tooling is expensive, and therefore the price diminishes. So the good news with 3D printing is that you can make objects for very small series, as little as one, whereas if you do things with injection molding, you would have to make tens of thousands units to make it worthwhile. But that is actually, for additive manufacturing, both a blessing and a curse. Okay? Because that means that if you consider direct manufacturing, there is always a point, always a volume of production above which it's actually better to use traditional manufacturing, injection molding. Of course, technology progresses, but nonetheless, there will always be a volume of production, at least in the foreseeable future, where it's more economical to use injection molding rather than additive manufacturing. And in fact, if we look at the sectors where direct manufacturing is used, these are all sectors where you need either low volume of production or where you need a level of complexity. Okay. So that's the thing. There are only 3 cases where 3D printing wins. Time is an issue. You're in a Formula One team. You need a part for tomorrow, 3D printing. Complexity is an issue. You launch satellites. You need to have a very good weight-to-strength ratio, additive manufacturing. Or you're going to build small volumes. Okay? The 2 first ones are more straightforward. So today we're going to focus on that particular one, volume. And answering this question of volume through co-creation is, how do we go beyond niches? Because if it's more costly to produce with additive manufacturing, then you need to find reasons for people to pay more. Okay? And we all know that one of the ways to do that is to mass customize product. If products are customized precisely for the needs of clients, then they should be willing to pay more. But the question is, what do you customize? How do you know what's good for the clients? If people can customize shoes, if people can customize cars, if they can customize tennis racket, how do you know what's good for them? Okay. So that's why we speak about co-creation. Okay. So we heard a bit earlier about co-creation. What is it? It's basically an active, creative, social, collaborative process between producers and users aimed at creating value. What is not co-creation is when customers are just choosing from different options. You know, like if you go choose your car and you choose the color and whether they have leather seats or whether you need, like, GPS in it, this is customization, but this is not co-creation. Co-creation, you need to have an actual input from customers. What kind of input? Then it's important to understand how the co-creation process is organized, okay? Sometimes it's very much integrated. You are going to co-design with your clients a particular product. In this case, you have similar roles. In other cases, you could have a situation where a client tells you, okay, well, that's what I want, just make it. Okay? And that enables us to understand the different types of co-creation. So here, this is a framework which we created with a colleague of mine. And you have two axes. One axis, the vertical one, tells you whether the activities of co-creation between companies and their clients are differentiated, they do different things, integrated, they actually do things together. And the other axis, which is very important to understand potential issues and potential challenges, is whether the output, the outcome of this co-creation is meant for one particular customers, in which case it's custom, or whether the output, the outcome of this co-creation process is meant for the mass market. A few examples. In the quadrant over there, we have Threadless. Threadless is a crowdsourcing t-shirt company. It's a situation where roles are differentiated. The crowd designs the t-shirt, okay, and the company manufactures the t-shirt. And of course, it's meant for the mass market. Many people will buy the t-shirts that have been produced. If we think about something which is integrated and towards mass market, we have the lower quadrant with open source software. Open source software means that we have companies and users developing together software, which is then used by many people. Okay? Let's continue. Custom and integrated. This is, for example, what Digital Forming offers. It's a company that enables you to customize designs created by, well, designers, customized objects. And it's integrated because you and the designer of, for example, these lemon squeezers are working together, okay, to make a lemon squeezer that you'd like. Okay. But it's custom because presumably you're the only person as a customer who is going to use this particular lemon squeezer. Other people are going to do something else. Finally, custom and differentiated is something that would look like 3D hubs when people come up with a design and they get it printed for themselves. Okay. Clear so far? Good. So having this typology enables us to understand the challenges which are associated with co-creation. And there are three of which I'm going to talk today. The first one is very important because it's intellectual property. And this challenge is very important because this is what tends to block companies in engaging in co-creation. You know, you want to co-create with your clients, and immediately the IP lawyer in your firm are going to tell you, we don't do that because we don't know what's going to happen with the IP rights, okay? And they're true, but not necessarily completely true, because the thing is that there are plenty of cases where it doesn't matter who has the IP, okay? If you're going to see like a bakery and you want to custom make a wedding cake, then it doesn't matter who has the IP, because presumably you're going to be the only one to have this cake. Nobody else will want it, okay? So in a way, it doesn't matter that we cannot assign IP. You know, what matters is that we can actually co-create without any problem. Also, what would people, for example, pirate a wedding cake and start copying it? You know, it doesn't make any sense. If it's customized, then it's for one person only. So we can map, actually, co-creation activities and see in which cases it matters and which cases it doesn't matter. But the point to remember is that there are plenty of occasions, plenty of processes of co-creation where you could have IP issues, but where it actually doesn't matter, okay? Because either it's custom or it's differentiated, okay? Good. Second challenge is control. Because co-creation, there are two types of co-creation. There is sponsored co-creation, which is carried out by a firm. I want my customers to co-create with me. But there is the dark side of co-creation, which is I don't want my customers to co-create with me, but mind you, they have digital manufacturing technologies, and they do it anyway. So sponsored versus autonomous. A couple of examples. Do we have fans of Games of Thrones? Just one? Oh, come on. Right, actually this TV show has loads of fans. And one of them, a couple of years ago, liked the TV show so much that he created an iPhone dock which was shaped as the throne of Game of Thrones. Okay? What happens? HBO sent the lawyers, cease and desist. This user said, but I'm happy to pay for a license. Let's share the proceeds. They said, no, we don't want to hear about it. As you will see, that has been exceedingly effective. If you look online, you can find thousands of objects which are inspired by Game of Thrones and which are for sale, including the famed dock, if you have a bit of money. Okay, so that's autonomous concretion. Now, some other companies do it differently. For example, Hasbro has noted that around its franchise My Little Pony, there were quite a lot of fans who were making objects, and they saw something happening. Instead of sending the lawyers, they actually team with Shapeways and let people upload and sell to the price of their choosing objects which are inspired by My Little Pony. And that's very important because not only they can see how the market is explored, if for example, Cutie Mark Crusader Medallion works and is sold a lot, they can actually integrate it in their range, but also they actually retain control. So autonomous versus sponsored. Because one of the things that is happening with additive manufacturing and 3D printing is that we're done with products. We don't have products anymore. We have platforms. Since we're in the automotive panel, we can see, for example, some objects which are online and related to Renault. Okay, you can see people do like some logos or some little cars. I have also some examples from SEAT. You can see like some cars, but also some add-ons you can put actually in the car. In the case of Renault, you can see people do parts as well, smartphone cases. So far, so good. Until you get to a point where actually the changes that are made by users are extensive. I really like this one, for example, which is an adapter to get your Nespresso machine in your Renault car. I'm not sure if it's been built by George Clooney, though, but that's quite interesting. Now, where it gets really worrisome is when people start to mess up with the doors, the electrical charging thing, when they actually create seatbelt lock that prevent your kids from opening the seatbelt, potentially you're in trouble. And of course, if they start putting online brake parts from Volkswagen, then you're in trouble. Okay? So why are you in trouble? You'll say, well, if there is a car, if the Volkswagen crashes, we can see that somebody's so stupid to print brake parts in plastic, obviously is responsible. But the problem is you have a brand. And I don't know if you remember, 2 years ago, there were 2 Chinese people who got electrocuted with their iPhone 5. And of course, it made a huge buzz. Very rapidly, it turned out that the iPhone was not the problem. These 2 consumers were using counterfeit chargers. Not Apple's fault. So what did Apple do? I don't know if anyone remembers. So they could just say, yeah, not our problem. That's the power supply which was counterfeited. You can't do that. When people die with iPhones in their hand, this is your liability as a brand. So what did they do? They organized a recall. They did a recall of counterfeit power supplies. For the next 2 years, you could actually bring to Apple a counterfeit power supply, and for a nominal fee, at cost, they would supply you with a genuine one. Okay? This is something which is about ecosystem and platforms. And the newcomers on the automotive market, they don't really see themselves as car manufacturers. In fact, you heard Local Motors this morning, a bit earlier. They are platforms. Effectively, cars as a product have become platforms, just like everything else. So if you're open, you have control. That's the important thing. HBO closed Game of Thrones, and they lost completely control over what was happening. Whereas Hasbro, with My Little Pony, has retained control. If you want to sell an object on Shapeways inspired by My Little Pony, they check, okay? And you would see in the terms and conditions that it's forbidden to upload violent and obscene ponies. And HBO, because they didn't open, they lost the control. Okay, granted, they might not care about violent and obscene content, but nonetheless, this is a problem. So that means that as a product manufacturer, you need to think of your product as a platform and start becoming a gatekeeper. You are not preventing creation, you are encouraging co-creation. Okay? Why? Well, because it brings money. For every single little pony that is sold, HBO gets a cut. Sorry, Hasbro gets a cut. For every Game of Thrones product which is sold, HBO gets 0 and has to make the lawyers work. The last and final challenge relates to time, which is also my challenge at the moment. Because yes, it's true, we can co-create and we can customize, but, and it's all great, we've heard about that. But 3D printing has an enemy, and this enemy is time. How much time will your customers spend customizing things? Nowadays, you can only customize your Nike shoes, but tomorrow you'll be able to customize anything. You know, what for? What's the purpose of customizing? And if we look at the niches, we find that the niches that exist are where there is a purpose in customizing. Now, is there a purpose in co-creating cups and cutlery and statues? And even if there is a purpose, you know, people need to find time. They're already the whole day long on Facebook. So that means that for 3D printing to become mainstream, it has to be associated with other technologies. So you need to take 3D printing and things like big data, IoT, I think Local Motors was a very good example, and machine learning. Okay? That is what is going to make it mainstream. For instance, IoT, that's a connected toothbrush. Does anyone has one? So if you don't, a connected toothbrush is a great tool. It tells you that you didn't brush your teeth long enough. Normally, you do know that, okay? Even if it tells you that you didn't manage to reach this tooth here at the back, the problem is your jaw is like that. It's not your fault, it's just your jaw is like that. But imagine collecting the data and making the head of a toothbrush, which is just for your jaw. Connected tennis rackets. You know, it tells you you didn't hit the ball in the middle. I know, I play badly tennis, but I know that, okay? No point for me to pay for that. But what if it uses the data when I play badly to tennis, crosses it, combines it with the data from thousands of tennis players, and 3D prints a tennis racket that will finally make me have my service right? Okay? So, just to finish, the key takeaways, co-creation is unavoidable. It's going to happen whether you want it or not. So first thing, as a company, you need to be able to identify the type of co-creation that you're going to be in and see what kind of IP issues there are, which in many cases are absolutely non-issue. You know, that's not a problem. Second, you need to stay in control. Just thinking we don't want to hear about it, you know, don't want to hear about it, we don't want to hear about it, is still going to happen anyway, and you want to be in control. It's going to happen with any product, because with digital manufacturing, products become platform. And finally, you need to be the gatekeeper, and if we want co-creation to work, it means you need to automate it. People are not going to spend days and hours customizing objects. They want that to happen largely automatically. And I'm done.
Good, bravo. Thank you very much.